Okay. Good afternoon, fellow councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to South Kesteven Planning Committee on the 22nd of July 2021. As far as I'm aware, we have no practice fire alarm today, so if you should hear the alarm, please vacate the building and meet out at the front. We have joining us today Director of Growth and Culture, Nicola McCoy-Brown, when she gets here, a bit late. We also have officers, Phil Moore, Special Products Manager, Phil Jordan, Principal Planning Officer, and we have two new officers who will be presenting for the first time today, so please be gentle with them, Ellie Seiler and Adam Murray. We have Martha Rees on Planning as Legal Advisor, Shelley Thurkel as Acting Principal Democratic Officer, and Alice Atkins as Democratic Officer. Thank you. Public speakers, please be aware you have 3 minutes to speak and ward member has 5. Shelley will advise you when you have 30 seconds left. You will be allowed to finish your sentence but not continue with another paragraph. Please be aware that when using your mic, it takes a couple of seconds for it to engage, and speak clearly directly into the microphone so it can be picked up for recording. This is being live streamed via YouTube. There is also a slight change to the agenda. Item 4 will now be taken as item 7, and item 7 will now be taken as item 4. Okay. So, can I have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Councillor Robert Reid and Councillor Mike Exton have given their apologies. Councillor John Cottier will be substituting for Councillor Robert Reid, and Councillor Judy Stevens will be substituting for Councillor Mike Exton. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have item 2 on the agenda, disclosure of any interests? No, but if you do think of any while we're in the meeting, please disclose them. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June 2021. Is everybody happy with those minutes, and can I have a proposer? Yes, Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam. Just one little point, Madam Chair, a very important point though. Page 22 with regarding the item at the co-op application S201124. I made the point with regarding the pedestrian crossing, and equally as important point as that was, I did request double yellow lines to be installed. Can I request that that's put in the minutes, please, Madam Chairman? And apart from that, I'll be happy to propose them if you agree to that. Is that okay, Madam Chairman?
Yes, it is.
I'll propose them.
Right, lovely. Do I have a seconder? Sorry, thank you, Councillor Bishnasing. You happy to second?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Lovely. Lovely. Can we have a vote on that? All those in favour of the minutes, please. 10, thank you. And those against? None. And those abstentions? 2, 3, no 2. Thank you. We have a number of public speakers, and I will pass over to our Vice Chair, Judy Smith. Thank you.
Good afternoon, fellow members, officers and members of the public. As you've heard, agenda item 7 now becomes agenda item 4. Application reference S210420. Partial demolition of social club. Proposed 2-storey rear extension and roof extension. Change of use from A4 drinking establishment and D2 assembly hall to C3 residential use to create 15 residential units at 95A Westgate, Grantham. And against this application, Jade Meadows White and Richard Elvin, and for Rahul Patel. Agenda item 5, section 73 application for variation of condition 2, approved plans of planning permission S18 0475 to amend balconies. Location 85 Manthorp Road, Grantham. The district ward councillor is Councillor Ray Wotton. Against, Mrs. Veronica Wheeler and Kate Midgley, and for David De Fusto. Agenda item 6, application reference S21 1201. Submission of details reserved by conditions 2, historic building record, and 5.8, pocket park landscaping of S21 0113, reserved matters application for details relating to external appearance, layout, scale, and landscaping, with associated open space and infrastructure for the erection of 373 new dwellings pursuant to outline planning permission under application reference SK 94/0125/12. Land south of Harvey Close and west of Wincanton Way, Bourne. Against, Stephen Gulari, and for applicant's agent, David Fletcher. And for item 7, this is a part heard application and no speakers permitted. Application S20 1759, proposed detached dwelling at land adjacent to 24 High Street, Colby. Location 24 High Street, Colby. And as it is pre-heard, the following members will not be allowed to vote: Judy Stevens, Penny Robbins, and Charmaine Morgan. Unable to vote or discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to state for the record that I've been contacted by numerous members of the public regarding application S21051, but I come to the meeting with an open mind. Thank you. And we will now go to application, agenda item 7, which is now going to be application 4, or item 4 on the agenda, but application 7, which is S210420. And can I have Adam Murray give his presentation, please? Thank you. Sorry.
I have a query, it's a point of order really. Application S211201, that we're looking at the reserved matters, but a number of members weren't on the original debate regarding that site. Just trying to understand why some of us can't vote.
No, it's not that one. It's item 4. Sorry, you missed it.
No, it's not it's not the other application. I agree with the one in Carbine. No issue with that.
Could you just pull your mic down, please?
Sorry. Yeah, what I'm querying is not the same scenario applicable to application S211201, in that a number of members weren't present during that particular application as well. So I'm just clarifying the difference.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. It's because it's a discharge of condition application. It's an entirely separate application to when you were considering the reserve matters. The reserve matters was approved, and now they've come back with a second application to confirm the details that needed to be confirmed further to the reserve matters, in the same way that when you dealt with the outline application, all members were then entitled to deal with the reserve matters application. Thank you.
Happy with that, Councillor Morgan?
I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Are we ready, Adam? Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and good afternoon, councillors. This is application S210420, and it is a full detailed planning application for the partial demolition of the social club, a two-storey rear extension and roof extension, and then change of use from an A4 drinking establishment and D2 assembly hall to residential use to create 15 residential units. The application has been referred to committee because it is a major development proposal and the site location is 95A Westgate, Grantham. And as councillor has kindly introduced me, I am Adam Murray and I am a senior planning officer with the council.
Sorry, could you just speak up a bit more? It's coming over a bit faint. Thank you.
Click on the screen. So the key issues in this application are the principle of development, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the impact on heritage assets, impact on neighbouring properties, access, highways and transport infrastructure, and then the section 106 heads of terms. So just to give a bit of context for where the site is, it's a site that's situated between Westgate and Greyfriars in the centre of Grantham. And then just to zoom in a little bit more in terms of an aerial view, the site is bound to the north by the car park, which is on the corner of Conduit Lane and Greyfriars, to the west by a number of single-storey industrial units, to south by an industrial unit, and then to the east by three-storey properties which front onto Westgate. Now, the properties that front onto Westgate are Grade 2 listed. The site is also directly adjacent to the boundary of the Grantham Conservation Area, and it's also located within the designated town centre boundary. Now, there are a number of existing buildings on site. So just using the elevation that you can see in the middle of your screen here, on the right-hand side, which is on the western end of the site, there is a 1.5-storey hall. Within the centre of the site, there is a 3-storey central element. At the back of that 3-storey element, there is a 1-storey element and then a gable end with pitched roof. And then on the left-hand side, so on the eastern side, sorry, there is a single-storey extension to there. Site is in a relatively poor condition at this stage. It's showing relatively frequent examples of fire damage, vandalism, waste dumping as well. In terms of the actual application scheme itself, I'll just use these next two screens just to highlight the changes on the actual sort of built form of the scheme itself. So again, starting with the 1.5-storey hall on the right-hand side, that will be raised to allow an additional element of accommodation. The 3-storey feature in the middle of
just interrupt. Jackie Smith is leaving the meeting because she's not sure if she's got pecuniary interests in this, so she's leaving the meeting for now. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Councillor. The central element of the building is suitable for conversion without major changes to the building fabric. If you look at the single-storey and the gable end feature, that will be raised. And the gable end will be retained, but the pitched element will be lost as part of the roof extension. And then the single-storey element backing onto Westgate, that will be removed to create an outdoor courtyard area. There are 15 flats to be created by the scheme. It is a one-bed duplex apartment, 8 one-bed single-story apartments, and 6 two-bed single-story apartments. All properties have been designed to meet the nationally described space standards. And then just looking at the site layout itself, as I mentioned, on this eastern side, there is an outdoor courtyard space to be created. There is provision made for cycle storage and provision made for refuse storage as well. There is no vehicular access involved in the scheme, and the pedestrian access is to be taken via a walkway between 93 and 95 Westgate and to the north and rear of Greyfriars. In terms of the evaluation of the scheme, then in terms of principle of development, sites are previously developed sites located within the built-up area of Grantham and is in relatively poor state of disrepair at the moment. So the opportunity to regenerate the scheme and provide a number of residential units is welcomed and in accords with the spatial strategy in that regard. However, it is appreciated that the site was formerly used as a community facility and is located within the town centre boundary. So it would result in the loss of that facility and would result in residential uses in a town centre location. In terms of the weight to be attributed to that policy conflict, it's understood that the site was previously advertised before and after the social club closed in 2016 without any interest. And it's also appreciated that the site is relatively well located to alternative facilities within the town centre. So in this instance, officers give that policy conflict relatively limited weight. So the view is in this case that on balance, the benefits of regenerating the site would outweigh that minor policy conflict and should be considered acceptable on the whole. In terms of other matters, in terms of design, scale of development is considered to be suitable for the site when you consider the existing buildings on the site and the surrounding area. The design and use of materials are considered to be appropriate for a town centre location and are considered to be a great improvement considered against the existing situation on site. Turning then to impact on heritage, the conservation officer has been consulted on the application and has raised no concerns and has said that the improvement to the site would be welcomed. It's considered that there's no significant impact on neighbouring properties. The development looks to retain sort of the footprint of the existing building, so it wouldn't encroach on the existing properties in that respect. And environmental protection have got no concerns in terms of noise pollution subject to the implementation of mitigation measures. Coming on to access and highways, Lincolnshire County Council as the local highways authority have been consulted on the application and have no objections. In terms of the pedestrian access, the proposed site layout does acknowledge that those rights of way are outside of the applicant's ownership, and public representations received on the application have claimed ownership of those rights of way and have stated that they would not grant rights of way across their land. In that sense, the grant of a right of way is a private land matter. Plan practice guidance is very clear in terms of that is not a material consideration for planning applications, and case law is also very clear that whether or not an application or development proposal can be delivered is not a material consideration into whether or not to grant planning permission. A Section 106 agreement is currently being progressed for the affordable housing contribution, which is 20% affordable housing, which is 3 units on this site. And given the challenges of providing affordable housing as part of a flat scheme, in this instance, the applicant is going to effectively serve as a private affordable housing landlord and work on the same terms as a registered provider. There's no other requests for contributions for the scheme. So on balance, the principal development is considered to be acceptable. The application is considered to accord with the development plan on the whole, and it's considered that there are no material considerations which would indicate that plan permission should not be granted. So in this case, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions in the main report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. So I'll hand back to you, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Lovely. We'll go to the next speaker. Yeah. And could we have Jade Meadow White, please, to come and speak? Thank you. No, sorry, could you go over there where the public speakers are? Thank you. Yeah, where the microphone is, and then when you're ready to speak, push the button on the microphone. And you have 3 minutes.
Does that work? Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm attending on behalf of Mrs. Pam Meadows of Grantham Property, who is unfortunately unable to be here today due to the short notice given of the meeting. Mrs. Meadows is the owner of number 95 Westgate, and while she does not object in principle to the proposals for the said conversion, she has asked me to outline her genuine concerns regarding right-of-way and access to and from the development. The deeds reveal that there is no right-of-way over the passageway or walkway, as you mentioned, for 95 Westgate afforded to the now historic social club. The deeds in no way suggest the entitlement to use the passageway as public thoroughfare from Greyfriars to Westgate, and the property was quite simply not built nor designed to accommodate a public thoroughfare. The passageway is only 32 inches wide at its narrowest point and 38 inches wide at its best, and therefore not wide enough to sensibly allow wheelchair or pushchair access, or in fact any significant pedestrian traffic. There is also an 8-inch step at the entrance of the passageway, which if removed would threaten the Grade 2 listed status of the property. Now, I do recognise that a heritage statement was submitted alongside the original plans for development, but argue that this focuses more on the visual impact of the conversion and does not make reference for the structural impact of removing the step in question. Any alterations made structurally in the passageway risk significant impact to number 95 as both property and business. If the step is not removed, yet access is still permitted, issues for those requiring a wheelchair would be even further enhanced. Also, as the occupier of number 95, Mr. James Meadows, with the permission of Mrs. Pam Meadows, ensures that the passageway in question is locked every evening to enhance safety and cleanliness to both his business and the flat above. Mr. Meadows has done this for many years, as prior to doing so, he found the passageway was frequently vandalised and used for urination and drug taking, as is sadly the case with many open passageways. Now, I've read in the report that Lincolnshire Police have been consulted on the application and, like Mrs. Meadows, have raised no objection to the principle of the development on site. However, they have raised concerns about the proposed access routes and have recommended that access points are gated with dawn-to-dusk lighting and clear and unrestricted surveillance. Mrs. Meadows does not grant permission for this to be implemented on her property. In summary, our objection does not concern the development as a whole, but rather the breach of rights should access be granted via either number 94 or number 95 Westgate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions, please?
We don't ask you questions.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alice, could you just... We'll just wait for that to be cleaned and then we'll have Mr. Richard Elvin come and speak, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to participate today. I represent my family, Elvin Properties, who are the owners of 98, 99 Westgate and the entrance road to those properties. My objections have been fully submitted, but I ask the committee in particular to note the following. This application is totally predicated on the applicant using land they do not own and have no right of access over. Without an agreement for a right-of-way, this application should be refused. To date, there has been no approach from the applicant or their agents for a right-of-way agreement. This condition has not been stipulated in the planning conditions. I refer to your drawings numbered P100A and 101A. It states refuse collection emergency area. The yellow hatch indicates right of way to be agreed for refuse and emergency services. Bin collection, 6+ bins will be needed to be wheeled out of the store along the illustrated path, a distance of approximately 31 metres, to a collection point and deposited on private land not owned by the applicant, and away to refuge trucks, which will have no rights to park on this land. And if it were to park, it would block the access to 9899 Westgate. The application clearly marks the refuse collection area emergency vehicle access is sited on private land. Cycle store and access, storage for approximately 20 bicycles, providing a secure cycle storage. Access to the cycle store can be via front or back access. The route marked in blue clearly shows the back access going over private land. Rear access for cycles is not possible without an agreed right of way. Pedestrian access, plans also clearly indicate pedestrian access to greyfires over private land. There is no footpath in existence to contribute to pedestrian and cyclist safety. The first 31 metres are not paved and totally unsuitable for pedestrian and cyclists. The remainder is paved, but is a very busy access road to 9899 Westgate and would be extremely hazardous to pedestrians, cyclists and motor vehicles. Should an accident occur, we would move into the arena of complicated litigation on the areas of responsibility. On the grounds of pedestrian safety and highway safety, this application should be refused. Has full consideration by the plans been given to the proximity of the SKD development reference S050478 and S18/1040? Has the planning department confirmed there is 22 metres between windows? Madam Chair, I would suggest this application does not meet 21st century access expectations. To permit the main access route for pedestrians and cyclists to be over an unpaved surface and without footpath construction to modern standards, one might say that is positively Victorian. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Lovely, thank you. And could I have the applicant, Mr. Rahul Patel, come and speak, please? Thank you very much.
Hi all, I'm one of the applicants for the site. My name is Rahul Patel. In reference to 95A Westgate, we have been working with the council from 2 years. There's been many planning officers been involved in this scheme, and they've all been favourable for the scheme. But unfortunately, they moved on and they parted ways. So with Adam, we created a scheme for 15 units. And it's just to rejuvenate the whole area of Grantham. You can see it's all in disrepair. We have tried to secure the site. Vandalism has happened. There's been arson on the site as well. So we're just trying to rejuvenate the town centre to make sure there is more accommodation for people working in the town centre and just for working professionals to be moved in. In reference to Mrs. Meadows and other speakers' concerns, about the passageway, that's a legal issue, and basically there is right of way. As you know, the social club's been there since the World War. There's people been frankly using it, so there's no issues with people not using it. With the heritage, we would work with the heritage team to resolve the step issues for wheelchair access. There is access around the back of the property for wheelchair and pushchair access. And basically, it would just stop the drug use within Grantham, really. And landscaping will be created for footpaths, for cyclists. So there's no issues on that. So if there's any questions or any concerns, I think this scheme will be favourable for Grantham City Centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If anybody wishes to ask the app any questions, it has to be relevant to what he has just said. Thank you. Councillor Phil Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Patel. The police are obviously concerned about the possible risk, particularly during hours of darkness, and recommend that the point of entry is gated with access control, dawn to dusk, etc. I just wondered if you would comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We can address that. That's not an issue. We can have gated access. That's not a problem to get into the building. At the moment, the police has got an issue because there's a lot of vandalism happening at the area. So with this scheme, would look to hope to stop any vandalism and drug use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. What were the views of the fire brigade regarding the narrow access to the building?
No views whatsoever. They haven't come back with any concerns. I can't really speak on behalf of the fire brigade, but we have had no issues.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? That isn't, you can't ask that question of the applicant because he hasn't spoken on that. Thank you.
I was referring to the access to the building.
Yeah, but you asked what the fire brigade.
Well, what do they have to say regarding the access? It's to do a good design.
Yeah,
and
but he
safety.
hasn't mentioned that, so you can't answer that one at this point.
He talked about the access to the building. Councillor Dilks just referred to the police's comment on the access to the building, and I was asking a perfectly sensible question regarding the fire brigade's view on the narrow access.
I'm just going to ask for reference in a minute because the police have been asked in the body of the report, but the fire brigade haven't. No, it's not in the report. It hasn't been mentioned. So we'll just refer to the officers in a minute. Thank you.
Could I answer that?
Okay, I've had legal advice. Quite happy. Thank you. Carry on. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bisnassing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Rahul. I would very much like to, are there any provision made for any of the residents having car parking facilities, anything like that?
So we've done a transport report documentation, and it showed with it being in city centre, we don't really need car spaces with O2 emissions and stuff. There is a local car park spacing there around the corner, and we're just trying to promote cycling and just everyone working within the city centre or city area. So that transport link, I think it was submitted, you'll be able to see that, and there was no concerns about parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, Councillor Milnes.
Sorry, a little late in the day there. I'm going back to access as well, please, if I may, to do with the bins and how do they get collected and where do they go to? We've been told about private land and private rights of way. Could you answer that for us, please, as to how that's going to work?
I'll try. It's not been ironed out yet, but obviously we'll be able to figure that out. But you just thrown that at me. So if there'll be a waste collection company like Biff, for example, or someone local within the area, there is access there, because obviously the social club had use of access before for bins and waste removal from site. So I don't see there'll be anything different from this site. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Patel. I think that's it. You've already asked a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we will
Thank you,
now
Council.
go to officers, questions to officers and debate. Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you. Just following up my question, I wondered, Adam, and welcome to the District Council, by the way. I just wondered if we could, having heard Mr. Patel's comments on the concerns by Lincolnshire Police, if we can make it a condition that the point of entry mentioned is gated with appropriate access control dawn to dusk, and da-di-da, exactly what it says in the, can we actually condition that?
Yeah, so if I just come back on that point, Councillor, the comments from the Lincolnshire Police primarily relate to the underpass element of the building to be constructed. So if I just take you back to the proposed site layout, their concerns primarily relate to this underpass sort of overhang element that you would have on the 3-storey element. And it is part of condition 10 in the main report, which says that the applicant should give consideration to restricting access to the courtyard and to that underpass element as part of the final details of the outdoor courtyard area. So that would resolve what the comments were from Lincolnshire Police.
Thank you, but what you've just said is that the applicant should give consideration to. That is not a condition that says that meets the requirement, if I can suggest, of the Lincolnshire Police. You know, I could consider it, but I can decide not to do it.
So it is a condition that requires the applicant to provide details of it. So it would come back to the council as a discharge of condition as to whether those details are satisfactory.
That sounds better. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, thank you.
Thank you. Can you please clarify whether or not the fire brigade were consulted, and if so, what was their response to this design? And if we can make it conditional, if not, that if it's approved, that it's only goes ahead subject to their approval.
Yes, Councillor. So Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue were consulted on the application, but they didn't provide any response to it. In terms of those elements of fire access, etc., and those elements of it, that is something that would be resolved under building regulations. I believe it comes down to either a fire vehicle being able to get within a certain distance, or alternatively sufficient provision is made for a sprinkler system to cover that element as well.
Thank you. Quick, yeah.
So have we had confirmation that a sprinkler system will be going in?
As I say, Councillor, that's something that's resolved through the building regulations process as opposed to through the planning process.
Very quickly.
Thank you. I used to be county councillor and worked with the fire brigade on the committee. If we leave it till the building works part of the process, then that entire building could go up and then they could refuse use of it. So they recommend that these matters are dealt with in the planning process.
Thank you. Councillor Milnes.
Yes, thank you. Continuing the theme of the access problems, if the accesses aren't within the application, we presumably can't condition any of these requirements. I don't know how that's going to work. And things like bins, access, I mean, people obviously have to move in and out, don't they? And everything like that. And I'm just looking, you know, in terms of policy DE1 and the NPPF section 12, good design. And this, to me, would appear to be a fundamental issue with this application. And also when it comes to the affordable housing element, where 10% of that has to be accessible and what have you housing, the wheelchairs and everything. And yet that we have no control over these access arrangements to condition them or anything like that. Now, I understand what you say, that that's a legal matter, but surely as part of a planning application and as part of these policies, that should be a material consideration, I would have thought. So perhaps you could just clarify all that for us. Thank you.
Yeah, so as I say, in terms of those rights of access, they are certainly important issues that will have to be resolved. But as I say, they are private matters to be resolved rather than in terms of the access considerations for the application. As I say, the Lincolnshire County Councillors Highways Authority have been consulted. They're satisfied with things. There is a condition in there to require suitable provision to be made for that 10% requirement for accessible and adaptable dwellings. And I hope that answers your questions, Councillor.
Well, I'm just wondering how we can condition that if it's a legal issue and we have no control over it. I was under the impression that when we do a condition, there has to be an element of control and within the red line, things like that.
Apologies, Councillor. Just to come back on that point, yes. So in terms of it is suitable for the site to be accessed for disabled people via Greyfriars, there is no stepped access element to there, albeit, as you say, it may well be a degree of cobbled access, etc. I believe. In terms of those legal rights of way, in terms of those actual access requirements, there are no works required to deliver those access points. Those accesses are already in place. It is simply a matter of those legal rights of way, as I say, which would be then a legal matter to be granted rather than in terms of works required for planning permission.
Sorry to come back, but we are effectively in a form of debate, aren't we, asking our questions? So, for example, when one of the alleyways has been described as being rather narrow and yes, a bit dodgy. Do we consider that therefore to be a suitable access for these new residents and any tradesmen or anybody else that's going up and down there, along with anybody in the affordable accessible housing? Do we consider that as a suitable access? And also going back to your cobbled surface way, if somebody's in a wheelchair, I know very well you can't push a wheelchair or drive it very.
As I say, Councillor, the County Councillors Highways Authority have been consulted, they're satisfied. If we get to a point where works are required to get an access, that would be a separate application element because it would then be outside the red line boundary. But in terms of the actual application we've got in front of us, as far as we're concerned in this instance, there are no works actually required in terms of highways access or pedestrian access.
Thank you. Councillor Bisnell Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ready? Okay. Well, I say I'm not satisfied with the answers you gave with regard to the access because I'm very concerned when you have got vulnerable people that are living in the forefront and now also access to that places, as the police themselves say, it presents a risk, particularly during the hours of darkness. So I'm very concerned about that. But my main point I wanted to raise is with regard to affordable housing. It says a minimum of 20% affordable housing to be provided, which is equivalent to 3. Now, with a minimum of 60% social, affordable, intimated housing, is that minimum 60% of that 20%? Or is it of the remainder of it? And could you probably clarify that for us? You know, but where does the remainder 40% affordable home, what category do they come in?
So as I said, the overall requirement in terms of affordable housing is 20%. And then within that, the split is between the 60% for the different tenure requirements. It's a split of 60-40 across the different tenures. So I believe it's 60% for, yes.
Sorry, can you put your mic on, please?
So, sorry. So you're saying all that 20% is the 3 housing, so that will be divided between the 60-40, as you say. So what actually happens to the remainder 12 housing? So they are going to be at full market value prices?
Yes, councillor.
I don't find it when you have a majority of them, you're saying that it's going to be affordable homes in the town centre for people working in town.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. A comment and a question. I know this site, Madam Chairman, the Westgate Club. I've attended several events there over the years. It's one of these places in the town where brings back a lot of memories, happy memories for a lot of people. So these recreational places, you know, they tend to be disappearing in the town. We've lost the Marco's Club in the past that people recall, and that went to housing. The Granada on the High Street, which is now a shopping centre. There was one back in 1954 that closed, the Empire Theatre and Theatre Royal on George Street. That closed, and that is now housing. So this one, obviously, you know, moving towards a housing development. That's little alleyway down to the site in question. It is narrow, Madam Chair, there's no question about that. But you know, these little narrow alleyways, they tend to be part of Grantham's history in some respects, don't they? So you know, what I'd like to ask is, does the planning officer, by the way, welcome to the council, Adam. Do you have any slides that could show us the access, please, from the Greyfriars perspective, just to give us an understanding of it from that point, please? Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
So the image that you have on the screen now, that is taken. So Greyfriars is to the right-hand side of the screen here. The industrial units boarding onto the side that I referred to, you can just see on the corner of your screen on the right-hand side. And then where you have the reference to rights of access going across the north and then to the rear, that will be coming in front of the bollarded section and then down that access point that you can see between the parking area and the back of the buildings on the screen.
Thank you. Do I have any other question? Oh, sorry, Phil.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a sort of general comment about the accesses, because there's quite a bit has been said about that. Just to clarify and give my point of view on that, there's 2 existing accesses to the site, one to the front that connects the site with Westgate, and then the access to the rear that connects the site with Greyfriars. Those existing accesses are considered to be appropriate to provide access to and from the site. Members are entitled to form a different opinion over those existing accesses and their suitability, but they would need to provide evidence to support why they didn't think those accesses were suitable in planning terms. And that could be to do with the quality of the surface, and some of the members have raised concerns over, you know, how accessible they would be to certain groups. But that's for members to form that opinion and if necessary, support that with evidence. The officer's view is that those existing accesses are suitable. Separate issue that exists that legally it seems that the owners of this site can't use those accesses at the moment. That's the point that's not a planning matter and would be a separate issue to be resolved. So if members felt those accesses were suitable in planning terms, i.e. they provided a suitable access for a range of users to and from the site, and permission was granted on that basis, the applicant would still need to resolve that legal right-of-way issue, and the owners of those accesses, if there aren't rights over them, could effectively deny the the applicants the rights to access the development over those existing accesses. And as I say, that's just a separate legal matter that would need to be resolved. But the planning matters are whether those existing accesses in their current state provide suitable access to and from the site. I hope that sort of clarifies those sort of two separate issues there.
Thank you, Phil. No, I'm sorry, as an applicant, you can't speak now. You've had your chance. You can't answer any questions or ask any questions. Thank you. Do I have any questions from any other councillors? Councillor Morgan?
It's more about design. With this particular site, I'm conscious that there's an underground network in Grantham, a historic underground network, and a number of the buildings have got cellars, then have tunnels linked to other parts. Obviously, we're looking at the outside of the building, but I just wondered if there's been any discussion regarding access to or protection of, even if it exists on this particular site. Thank you.
Nothing that I'm aware of, councillor, no.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to ask any questions? Debate? Councillor Bellamy, thank you.
Well, the only thing I was going to point out is that this is similar to the deep in one, the pub, because on that one, I think it was the car park where the applicant had no right to use the car park, even though he was turning the pub into residential. So although I can see all the problems with it, I can also see that it's not something that we can probably solve. So I'll propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Bellamy. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Can you turn him on, Colin?
Yes, I will second it, David.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Do I have any more debate from anybody? Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, thank you. I think this particular application does pose a real dilemma because we do have a desperate need for the type of housing that this is providing. And it also complies with our requirement to actually encourage people to live in the town centre, in and around the shops. So in many respects, it ticks lots of boxes. But I have got concerns regarding, I'm actually amazed the fire brigade have not come back, to be honest. Absolutely amazed. I have got some real concerns about the practicality and whether or not the solution would be found. If we make a decision today, what we're really being told is we have to ignore all the access issues and just look at the design and the delivery of this particular site. So that's what I would say is what people have to bear in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Milnes?
Yes, one further question, please, to the case officer. Thank you. Can you clarify paragraph 130 of the NPPF on where a development should, amongst other things, improve the way an area, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, improve the way an area functions, and whether we consider that these accesses are improving the way this area functions. It's rather in danger of being a landlocked sort of site, isn't it?
Yeah, as you say, councillor, so part A of the of paragraph 130 is about a place functioning well over its lifetime. As I say, our view as officers is that it is suitable. That is based on the advice also provided by Lincolnshire County Council. But in terms of whether those accesses are suitable, that is something as a material consideration is for you as committee to consider as well.
Thank you. I think it's Councillor Bellamy first and then Councillor Silver. Thank you.
The only other point I'd make is that if for whatever reason we do, I've done. Sorry. Yeah, the other point I was going to make is that bearing in mind what these guys have said and what's in the report and that, and what the fire brigade have said, and would we be able to, if it was turned down, would we have any grounds, come an appeal to defend that appeal? So I'd probably think that we wouldn't. But.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Just a question, Madam Chairman. How are the construction vehicles and delivery vehicles going to gain access to this to deliver all the materials to build the site? That's a question I'd like to ask, please.
Phil.
So this question about access.
Sorry, could you turn the fan off? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
So the question about access has come up, and Phil's explained fairly comprehensively that access rights are not a material planning consideration. So I just wanted to expand on that a little bit, in that the granting of planning permission does not override the need to comply with other legislation, such as the building regs, which would, in this case, govern what fire safety measures that need to be taken. Granting of planning permission does not override property rights. So if for whatever reason the applicant couldn't secure rights over the front and rear access, then the development just wouldn't go ahead. Or if it did go ahead, they'll be left with a development that they couldn't occupy, which you wouldn't do if you didn't have certainty that the development could be occupied. Then you just would not go ahead with it. So that's just a very important point to make about any planning application, that the granting of planning permission does not override the need to comply with other legislation or to gain access rights, etc.
Thank you very much, Phil. Councillor Bellamy.
Just getting back to what Councillor Selby said, I'd assume that the access argument would have to be sorted purely because of what he said. The access situation would have to be sorted before they could start any work anyway, purely because they won't be able to get materials and equipment in there to do it. So basically that has got to happen before anything starts anyway.
Councillor Milnes, please.
Yes, I'm just going to go back to the bins and the bin collections. Are we satisfied? Do we need to satisfy ourselves that those can be adequately collected, or is this all tied up with whether they can get a right of way over a different access? And what about considerations of that? Is it something the council would consider, or is it a BIFA problem? And how do we ensure that this functions well?
So in terms of the actual collection point, again, that falls within the rights of access element of it. In terms of what the proposals are for collection, though, there has been consultation with the building regulations team. They are satisfied that the distance that it would travel to the point of collection is appropriate, that sufficient provision is made on site for the storage of refuse. So in answer to your question, yes, Councillor, we are satisfied as far as we need to be in terms of the planning consent.
Thank you. And we'll have Councillor Morgan. That will be the last question, I think, because we are going around a bit in circles. We are discussing the access, and all those questions I feel have been answered. So Councillor Morgan, thank you.
Yes, I'm just mindful actually, because of the access issues, in a way it's kind of led us down a particular way looking at this application. There was another point raised by a speaker though, which is of consideration, and that's regarding the density of the development in that area. And he did refer to the distance between the windows, between the buildings. And I do think that is definitely a material consideration. I would appreciate a view on that.
Yes, councillor, so you're entirely correct that it would be a relevant material consideration. I believe we've measured the distance to be around about 15, 20 metres, similar to what the speaker said. In terms of our view, we believe that that is something that in an urban sort of setting, such as within the town centre, that's an appropriate separation distance in this instance.
Thank you. Right. We've had a good debate.
Sorry, Chairman, just to be clear on that point, I think the point the speaker was making that there's an extant permission to the north of the site for another block of flats in the car park that was granted in about 2005 and confirmed as being extant in 2018. That hasn't been constructed, but if that were to be constructed and this were to be constructed, so subject to overcoming those legal issues, the separation distance between those windows would be about 15 metres, as the planning officer has said. Again, it's not the 22 metres, which is sometimes referenced in those suburban back-to-back contexts, but for this sort of more dense urban context, that separation distance is considered to be acceptable to provide sufficient amenity to any occupiers of those flats, should there be a position where both of those were constructed.
Just quickly.
For the sake of looking, because we could potentially look quite foolish if we approve something with no access to it, can we put a condition in the approval is subject to the access being granted?
So I can answer that as well. No, we can't, because it doesn't meet the 6 legal tests of a condition. Those rights of access are a separate, covered by separate legislation, as we've said. And so it's not necessary to do it, which is one of the 6 tests of a legal condition. So it's not something we can condition. It's not something we need to condition.
Thank you. Right, we've had a good debate. We've had a proposer and a seconder, so we go to the vote now, please. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 in favour, thank you. Those against? 1. And abstentions? 1. Thank you. That has been passed then. Thank you. So we will go to the next item on the agenda, which is S21 0510, and we will just wait for the officers to get their computers all ready and their presentation ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Are we all now ready? Item 5 then, please, and it's being presented by Adam again. Thank you.
Chairman, so if I can just interject to confirm for transparency purposes, Councillor Jackie Smith has left the chamber because she has an interest in this item also. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Again, yes, as you say, this is application S210510, and it is a section 73 application for variation of condition 2, which is the approved plans condition of planning permission S180475. And the application is seeking to amend the balconies, and it is at 85 Manthorp Road, Grantham. And again, to be presented by me, so hopefully you don't get sick of hearing my voice. So just to give an indication of the context, the site is located on Manthorp Road to the north of the sort of town centre of Grantham. Just to zoom in on the site, it's bound to the north by residential properties fronting onto Manthorp Road, to the northwest by Grantham Hospital, and to the east by Wyndham Park, and then to the south and west by residential properties fronting onto Lodge Way. It's a scheme that's appreciated. There's a relatively complex site history involved in this one. It was originally granted approval on appeal in 2016. There was then a subsequent Section 73 application made and approved in May 2018, which is now the base planning permission on this site. And then there's been subsequent non-material amendments made to that planning approval in terms of discharge of conditions, amendments to add solar panels, and then most recently amendments to the site layout, boundary treatments, and then minor amendments to the elevations. And then as you'll see on this image on the screen now, scheme has been significantly progressed on site so far. Works are still required to the top floor of the scheme and sort of the external treatments as well. In terms of the development proposals in this instance, the applicants worked with the council to produce a full set of consolidated plans to help clarify in terms of what the existing permission indicates and what the proposed changes are. And this application, the Section 73 application, is an amendment that relates to the parapet design, so the balcony design only in this instance. Now, members will appreciate in this case, with it being a Section 73, that it can't be used to revisit the principle of development. This can only be used to consider sort of the change to the conditions, and in this case, the actual changes in terms of design of the balcony parapet. So in terms of just switching between what we have approved at the moment and what is proposed, if we start with the southern elevation, which is the elevation in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see that there are currently a number of openings approved along that balcony. And then looking to what is proposed as part of the scheme, those openings will be realigned so they align with the doors out onto the balcony, and part of it will be closed off. And then there is a change from what is currently railings in those openings to what will be glazing. Looking then in terms of the north elevation, so the elevation in the top left-hand corner of your screen, you can see there's an existing railed opening along that top left-hand side. And the current proposal looks to reduce the size of that opening, change it from railing to glazing, and then introduce a new opening on the right-hand side, which will overlook the car park of the development. In terms of the eastern elevation, so this middle elevation here, you can see the two approved openings that currently exist, including the large opening here on the right-hand side. And the changes again, that large opening will be closed off and openings will be aligned with the existing doors out onto the balcony, and those openings will also be glazed. And then finally, just in terms of the western elevation, so the elevation on the bottom, you can see the existing railings on the second floor, and that area will be closed off, and a new area of opening will be added up onto the top floor, and again that will be a glazed opening rather than railings opening. The glazing is proposed to have a slight hue to it. The developer has confirmed that there's no actual colour reference to it, so it'll have a generally sort of clear coloured appearance with a slight hue to it rather than sort of any extravagant colours involved. In this instance, the applicant has argued that the openings that already are approved have consent for glazing. However, the approved plans that were granted as part of that non-material amendment did reference those openings as being railing. So in this instance, it's considered that changing from railing to glazing is something that is to be considered for all openings as part of the current application. Coming in terms of the evaluation, then as I just mentioned previously, it is a Section 73 application, so it has to be considered in terms of the changes to the conditions, and it can't be used to consider matters which aren't relevant to the proposals and the condition that it relates to. And again, it can't be used to revisit the principle of development. And given that it is a site that has permission and is already under construction, again, it's an application that has to be considered in the context of the existing fallback position that's provided. Looking in terms of the impact then on the character and appearance of the area, it's officers' view that the actual amendments would be relatively minor in the context of the overall development and wouldn't significantly alter sort of the character of the area or the appearance of the area. And the change from railings to glazing would actually, in officers' view, provide a degree of visual improvement in terms of adding an element of interest to that street scene. In terms of impact on heritage assets, again, Conservation Officer has been consulted and has raised no concerns. In terms of impact on neighbouring properties, the main report sets out a full consideration of that as an issue, appreciating obviously the views of residents, etc., and the concerns that they've raised given the complexities of the site history, etc. But in this instance, it's officers' view again that the change in balcony positions in those opening positions and the changing from railing to glazing wouldn't actually have a significant material impact on the level of privacy afforded to those neighbouring properties. So in this instance, officer's recommendation is to approve the application subject to the updated conditions set out in the additional items paper. And just one further thing for members to note is since the publication of the additional items, 2 further representations have been received on the application. However, in this instance, those representations relate to matters that have already been covered as part of the main report and as part of the additional items paper. So it is not considered to change the recommendation in this instance. Thank you, Madam Chair, and happy to answer questions again.
Thank you very much. Now we go to the public speakers, and we have Ward Member Councillor Ray Wootton. You have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. I can't believe, Madam Chairman, it's 14 years since I sat in this chamber speaking on behalf of my residents for the first application into 85 Lodge Way, which the committee, after great debate, threw out the application and rejected it on behalf of my residents. It went to appeal and the appeal was lost. A second application came in with recommendation for approval, and the committee threw that out as well and rejected that application. It went to appeal and the appeal was lost. A third application came to this committee and you again threw that application out. But unfortunately, in 2015, the appeal inspector granted that appeal, which was really destroying the character and the layout of that corner entrance to Grantham. Now, there's been several cases in the High Court on privacy, and recent case stated that there are invasions into privacy greater than usual, and such invasion of privacy would be capable of mounting to a common law nuisance as interference with quiet enjoyment of land. I believe that the residents of Lodge Way, which are adjacent to these flats, have a case to apply the objective test for determining whether there have been a material interference with the amenity value of their property. The building of 85 Manthorp Road flats with balconies overlooking Lodge Way and Manthorp Road homes, in particular in the summer months, may have diminished the value of their property and therefore fits that test. Madam Chairman, despite 14 years passing, residents' opposition to this development has not wavered one bit. At a recent site visit, nearly half of Lodge Way turned out to view the plans and to register with me their objections. And Chairman, why should residents who have had years of privacy, in the case of Mr. Adrian Hands at number 6 adjacent to the flats, have to shield his daughter's bedroom from prying eyes and had to move out? Why should Mrs. Veronica Wheeler, who is here today at number 4, have to screen her kitchen and bedroom? Why does Mrs. Kate Midgley at number 2 have to screen her entire property from prying eyes? Now, the occupants of 85 Manthorp Road and the penthouse flats have the opportunity now to look all across this area, Lodge Way into Manthorp Road. Yet the occupants of Lodge Way cannot see into their property. To me, that is wrong. On that case, Madam Chairman, I ask this committee to throw out this application and refuse it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wootton. And we have our next speaker against, which is Mrs. Veronica Wheeler. If you'd like to come over here, please.
I know you're going to take questions too, the council.
No. No, he doesn't want them. Thank you. So.
Well, I'd like to ask a question if
but
possible.
He does have to leave for another meeting now.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah.
So we can't ask questions of the ward member?
No, I don't think we can we? It's just the applicant. It's the applicant or the applicant's agent, not the ward member.
I thought we always did, Chairman.
We'll just look at the Constitution, thank you. It's at my discretion. Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak now? Thank you. Is your microphone turned on? Sorry, I can't see from here.
Before I start, I would like to show the members of the council planning committee something that Mr. Murray failed to do, which are these pictures he took himself of overlooking the properties in Lodge Way. Why he didn't put them on the screen, I do not know. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I would like to voice my objection to the planning application for glass balconies at 85 Manthorp Road. This development has for many years and still is blighting the lives of many residents of Lodge Way, and it is a blot on the landscape of Grantham. Now the developers have had the audacity to try and impose even more blight on our day-to-day lives by wishing to add glass balconies. Our privacy will be totally compromised. The occupants of the flats will have their privacy whilst being able to see into our homes and gardens, because the developers have felled many trees with PTOs on them that would have afforded screening. This will be a violation and intrusion into our lives. I personally feel the lack of privacy as my kitchen and bedroom are overlooked. I would like to be able to pose a question to Mr. De Fusto and members of the committee. How would they feel if their family could not use their kitchen and bedroom with privacy, or their children and grandchildren, their bedrooms, or the family, the garden? I would therefore request that this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Wheeler. And our next speaker is Kate Midgley. Thank you. Thank you. Start when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With regard to this planning application, I fully understand that officers of SKDC have complied with government guidelines and recommended acceptance. I also recognise it's members of the planning committee who actually make the decisions, and it is as persons elected to represent the views of the residents that I address them. Over many years, the residents of Lodge Way have endured and come to terms with the destructive dominance of this oppressive structure, which insults the historically sensitive integrity of the conservation area of Grantham. Permission for this was not granted by officers of SKDC, nor was it granted by elected members, but by someone who had probably never set foot in Grantham before pronouncing on his ill-considered decision. But now, as works on this ill-conceived, mismanaged development near completion, the applicants have decided that the privacy of residents in Lodge Way has not been invaded sufficiently. Additional glazing to and further balconies for the west, east, north and south elevations, I think they've covered the whole building. Change of railings for glazing, inevitably it will be smoked glass, will enable an increasing lack of privacy for and intrusion into the homes and lives of residents, while enhancing the view into our properties for prospective residents of the block. Living as we do, directly opposite, will have enormous impact into the already compromised home that my husband and I share. We have already endured the years of noise, the endless lorries, the constant dust and dirt, the damage to property, the disruption to access to our own homes. And now, as completion approaches and we accept the inevitable, they want to increase balconies and windows. But enough is enough. It is time to act by representing the residents of Lodge Way and not the interests of those responsible for this development. We live in the shadow of this monstrosity, which robs us of our right to privacy, affecting and dominating every aspect of our lives. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And can we have our next speaker, Mr. David DeFusto? Is he here? Thank you. Start when you're ready, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The approved planning applications S180475 already grants permission for the top floor balconies stroke parapets. To help avoid any confusion, we're not talking of the protruding external balconies. The application is about the approved current inline top floor self-contained balcony stroke parapet. The current application before you is a request for a minor amendment realignment of the already approved top floor balconies to allow for a more asymmetrical appearance of the building, whilst at the same time to better align the openings with the current window door openings on the top floor and below. The north elevation, There is a new balcony proposed on the northwest, which would be in line with the current balconies below. This would only overlook the car park and be approximately 50 metres away from the nearest habitable rooms of the neighbouring properties. The existing parapet to the northeast is to remain, but be significantly reduced in size from the current opening. On the southern elevation, there is already permission for 2 balcony openings. These will be replaced with 1 single opening that is further partially screened behind the presence of 2 existing mature trees. On the west elevation, the proposal is to remove the parapet overlooking number 6 Lodgeway and replace it on the southwest corner, which would now overlook the road to the west and not the house. On the eastern elevation, the proposal is to remove the current large parapet and replace it with a reduced length of parapet in line with the door openings overlooking Wyndham Park. There is no loss of privacy. Overall, there is a reduction in the meterage of the new parapet placements and sizing by approximately 4 metres over the current granted approved permission. Secondly, there are large distances between the building and any habitable surrounding neighbours, some by as much as 50 metres. Thirdly, the toughened laminated reinforced glass will replace totally open railings, which will also further aid privacy. In terms of character and impact of the area, the officers' reports state the proposals improve the quality of the design and are an improvement to the character and appearance of the area and results in positive visual interest to the elevations. They're appropriate. The report finishes by stating the application is considered to be in accordance with adopted development plan and there are no negative material considerations which indicate the planning permission should not be granted. And I hope the committee today also reached the same conclusion.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Milnes? No? Anybody? No? Do I have any questions for the officers? Councillor Morgan?
In view of the comments we've received, can you put up a slide that clearly illustrates the position in relation to the Lodgeway residents?
Yes, councillor. So if we just come through to these images, then these are photos taken from that top floor balcony on the southern elevation overlooking Lodgeway. These photos have been taken from the position where the new openings would go in, so aligning with those door and openings on the top floor. These views will give you an appreciation in terms of sort of the distance, and again, whilst mindful obviously of the concerns of the residents, etc. I think as officers we take the view that there is a separation between this view across the southern elevation and those properties within a public highway. And within that sense, you'd have an extent of views from people walking along the footpath adjacent to the highway, etc. And it is a fairly sort of similar situation to what you would have in most sort of urban settings with properties either side of a highway. And then if you're just coming around in terms of that new opening on the west-hand side, this is again taken from the view of where the new opening it would be. And again, whilst there is a degree of overlooking in terms of the rear garden, etc., you already have sort of existing properties, as you can see to the north here, which has a degree of overlooking. There is the car park, proposed car park that would separate again, which would run between the property and where the opening is. So again, as I say, and the record officer assessment is in the report in terms of what the existing situation is and what the approved situation is, it wouldn't increase the degree of impact on privacy.
Thank you.
Going back to the balcony designs, there are some balconies that are put in for aesthetic purposes only. In other words, you can't actually go out and about and walk around on them. Can you just clarify whether these are those sorts of balconies or whether we're talking about proper balconies where you could sit out all day if you wanted to in the sunshine?
So on this top floor element, yes, there is an element that you can step out onto and sit out on. Yeah, so in that element, in terms of the lower element, I believe they're more Juliet balconies, etc., where you can't step out. But again, in terms of this application only, and the changes to the design is those are approved balconies you can step out onto, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I've got some comments I'll come back to later. Just a question first, if I may. It was mentioned about trees that had TPOs on them. Well, I wasn't on the committee when this came prior. So I'd like to ask how many trees with TPOs have been taken down to take away a lot of privacy and the beauty of the area. Thank you.
Do we know that answer?
I don't know. I can't clarify or confirm or anything in terms of whether any tree preservation orders have been, any trees covered by a TPO have been removed. What I would say is that is a matter, if there has been TPOs removed, that would be a matter for the council's enforcement team to consider an appropriate action taken if that has occurred, as opposed to a relevant consideration as part of this application, because for this application, there are no changes in terms of removal of trees, etc.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions? Councillor Milnes.
Yes, thank you. This is particularly worrying, isn't it? I think with windows in that side gable end there and a glazed, not even a closed barrier where you can sit out and look straight down. And it's quite a height, isn't it, as well? You know, it's not even, you know, on a par. I mean, it slightly refers to the trees as well, but I mean, I wouldn't have even thought some landscaping there is going to mitigate that. And I'm just wondering what mitigation you might consider possible there, if any. And I was going to ask for a plan as to how this relates to these other properties, but that seems a pretty good photograph. And also, can you explain what you mean by not significant impact on the privacy and the amenity of these neighbours on number 6 on Lodge Way? That word significant, you know, just how much is it in your view? Sorry.
Thank you.
Start with a point in terms of not significant. Again, that's members will appreciate in this sense it is something that's a subjective decision. Members will have to come to their own assessment in terms of, as a material consideration, what degree of impact they believe there is on privacy. But in this instance, as officers, considering what is already the approved permission compared to what is proposed, it's our view that there isn't any sort of, I'll come back to the word significant, I'll say substantial changes in that sense in terms of what the implications would be of privacy, given that there are a degree of openings already approved. Our view is that there isn't any major degree of difference in that sense. In terms of the view in terms of this property itself, as I say, our view as officers is if you look at what the existing situation is, so there is that degree of overlooking already from properties to the north, and if you take it in the context of, if I come back to the proposed elevations, taken in the context of what was previously approved on that second floor, that opening that was approved there, again, there's not considered to be a major sort of difference in terms of impact on privacy then for that balcony higher up.
Sorry, Adam, could you just point that out again for me? So, because I believe the section of the building to the left, to the north, is significantly further back, and this is much closer to number 6. Is that correct?
So this is the southern elevation which faces Lodge Way. So that's the one on the top right-hand corner here. In terms of that balcony that we were just considering on the west elevation, there is difference in terms of the extension on that northern elevation, but for the western elevation, that separation distance is the same from what was previously approved on that second floor in terms of the extent of the elevation on that third floor.
I might be getting my elevations mixed up, but looking at the plan on page 60, I take it the west elevation is the one where the car park entrance and the car park are. Is that the correct elevation that we need to be looking at? And if it is, the new glazing on this far southwest corner would appear therefore to be a lot closer than anything that's on the recessed elements further back, and a lot of car park in between. Can you just clarify that? Thank you.
Apologies, yes, Councillor, you are correct. I stand corrected on that point. Do forgive me. Yes, so there is this part of the elevation would be closer, but again, when we're taking it in terms of consideration of the impact and consideration of what the existing situation is in terms of the existing properties, and taking it in terms of that view of you would, as you point out, the access point goes through that. You would have that separation of access between etc. So you have, again, similar considerations in a lot of urban environments, again, between access points, roadways, etc., separating properties. And that obviously is then a consideration in terms of what the extent of privacy would be.
So going on to the character and appearance and setting and context of these surrounding properties to this, I know I'm not opening the debate of how this got approved in the first place, but if we take that into account and what's in section 12 of the MPPF, paragraph 127, I think there's a couple of sections there, and our own DE1 policy. The context is that that particular balcony to me is quite a significant overlooking factor to that property. And I just wondered how you felt that fitted with those policies.
As I say, Councillor, in terms of impact on privacy, etc., and overlooking and those matters, they are material considerations. All I can say is in terms of as officers, we have taken a view based on what the existing situation is and considering it in the context of the policy in that view as well. As I say, our view as officers in our judgment is that there is not a significant implication in terms of that existing situation and what is then proposed. Again, though, mindful that as councillors, you are given the right to come to a different view on that point, though.
Thank you. Councillor Cottier.
I agree with every of the concerns going on with privacy, but the materials that have been requested, are they just coloured glass or are they going to be frosted glass?
So it is the details that have been provided is a hue glass, a similar sort of situation to, as I think the applicant's sort of a musky sort of situation. So it's not necessarily a coloured glass or a frosted glass, it's sort of a clear with a slight hue element to it.
Can we actually specify that these particular balconies are actually frosted glass to alleviate the residents'
we can ask
or
that.
opaque, as said?
Well, thank you.
I can try, sorry. Well, if members wanted to do that, if you wanted to condition that the glass balconies must be frosted or obscure glazed, you would have to first be satisfied that if they weren't obscure glazed, that it would lead to unacceptable degree of overlooking. So that would have to be your starting point, deciding whether or not what's in front of you is unacceptable or acceptable in terms of overlooking.
But weren't they originally going to be, what's the word? Railings, thank you. So presumably hued glass is more private than railings. Sorry? That's beside the point. It's Rosemary Cavery-Brown next, thank you.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I did sit on this. I understand now it's 14 years ago. I thought it was 16 years ago. It certainly was refused 3 times by our officers. So our officers are not in any way to blame for this. This was passed by somebody in London who had no idea what Grantham was like or the areas of where these bungalows were. At the time, I remember it was referred to as going to look like one of Poirot's hotel complexes that's in his TV series, and they were trying to sell us on this. All the time, we were insistent on those bungalows, if we had any say whatsoever, on them keeping their privacy. We were overruled. We've been overruled so many times in this town by the so-called inspectors in London. it just is not on. And on this occasion, I feel we should be a committee quite strong enough to say we either have opaque glass up there, if we've got to have glass at all, and we are, and as you say, quite rightly, you are correct. If we'd have had railings, God help us, you'd have seen everything. So I think as a committee now, we have got to ask our planners to come up with some idea of how they're going to make and keep the privacy of those other residents. I noticed, to my horror today, that the huge tree that was there that I thought had a TPO on it anyway. I thought it was definitely agreed that the big pine tree would not come down, is down. Now, is this one of these fly-by-night things where we've had to put up with this before, Madam Chairman?
Yes, but can I just say that has already been commented on, that if a tree has been felled, then that is an enforcement issue. That is not our planning issue now. And we've also been explained that if we want opaque glass, that we need to prove that hewn glass, whatever it is, hewn glass is appropriate or not sufficient.
Well then, Madam Chairman, can I then ask that we and our officers work as hard as we can? There must be a way to prove something. Usually, if you don't want to see it, you blank it out. So I suggest that we as a committee today put forward some resolution. We certainly don't pass this. Never, no way should we pass it. In my opinion, I think we make sure that we stand by those residents. That we lost one promise to them. We don't want to lose another one. And their privacy is, well, it's unthinkable that we should let them down again. So I think there's got to be a way that we can prove that if you like, everybody could go up there, I should think. We'll all go and see how much we can all see.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, that's how I feel. And I'm sure there's some way we can form a resolution by yourselves or Vice Chairman as to put this forward in the way that we are going to be shown that we will not promote it in any way. Thank you.
Legal advice, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to reiterate to members following some of the comments made today, that obviously when you're sat on the district planning committee, you represent the district as a whole and you're representing your local plan as a document in your planning policy. You don't represent local people unless you've removed yourself from the committee and are not actively part of the debate. That is the law and that is the responsibility you have when sat on planning committee. In terms of coming to a resolution today, as the officers have explained, if members disagree with the officer's recommendation, they have to have reasoning and a degree of substantiation to that reasoning as to why it's not acceptable. As Mr. Moore pointed out, obviously, if members want to make a substitution, again, that needs to be substantially justified and evidenced. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And we'll go to Penny Robbins next. Thank you.
Hi, I just wondered if Pilkington obscurity glass would be an option for this instead of something with a hue.
I think at the moment the approved plans condition specifies the type of material that would be used for the balconies that's already been submitted by the applicant. If members felt that those details weren't adequate, then it would be possible to include an additional condition that required submission of details of that material for the actual balconies. I think the officer advice on that is that we don't consider that to be necessary given the assessment of the additional impacts of these balconies. I think, listening to everything that's been said, we're certainly sympathetic to the current position and that position that was granted by the inspectorate in the first instance. However, we need to be really focused on the facts that we are assessing the additional impacts of these proposed changes and not taking a view on or a contrary view on what the existing situation is. I think, we're talking about moving the positions of balconies, the material of the balconies, but equally all of those existing elevations, as you can see on the screen there, that there's a lot of windows that already look out onto those properties in all directions. Some of them in a closer distance to that top floor balcony. So it's a very difficult case to make that these changes to the balconies really sort of make any further additional impact on the current situation. As the planning officer said, members are certainly entitled to come to a different view on that, but that would need to be, again, supported, strongly supported by your own evidence as to why that's the case, and that would be necessary both to either refuse this application or to impose an additional condition which effectively seeks a different material to the one that's already been suggested for approval. So it's certainly something that can be considered and can be done, but my advice would just be, members certainly need to be comfortable that they can make that case as to why that's necessary, based on the current situation that's already been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that advice. Councillor Judy Stevens.
It would be really useful. Can you hear me? Pardon? The fan. I must say, I must thank you very much. This has been, it's lovely, isn't it? Just to say, though, that it would be really useful to know what hue glass is, because I don't know what, pardon, tinted glass. Okay, tinted glass. It sounds like it's quite a subjective matter, doesn't it, this? Because you've got one half of the room thinking that it's going to impact on the view, on their privacy, and the other half saying it isn't. So it's a very difficult position for us to be put in. It is a shame that it seems that the privacy has been compromised by the taking down of a TPO tree. I know that is not the subject of this application, but it would be good if outside of this room that could be either taken forward or not to the enforcement team, if that has actually happened. As I say, it is difficult to sort of, without really knowing. However, I don't know whether the difference between tinted glass, if that's what it is, it probably sounds a lot more, marketese to say hue glass, but whether that is any more going to impact on the privacy than railings would, to be honest. So it's a shame that we didn't have some glass here, really, but on that basis, I think it's a 50-50 thing, isn't it? But I do definitely think we need to look into the tree situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. I think another consideration would be the height of the railings and the screening, whatever it is, whether it's railings or whether it's glass. It could make quite a significant difference. And I wonder if that's been considered or if that's something we can consider. The second question I've got for our officers is that we may be more relaxed regarding the design facing the park as opposed to facing Lodge Way. So is there scope to reflect that in the decision?
Would you like to answer that? Thank you.
If I just come back on the first point, Councillor, in terms of the height of the parapet, etc. In terms of those photos that you've seen, what I can stress in terms of that height, I appreciate is probably around about 6 foot, the actual parapet height, something like that, because to take those photos, it did require me to stand on a set of materials, etc., to actually look over that balcony. And if you're looking at there is no difference if you look at the approved elevations and the proposed elevations. What the height of those railings are would be the same as what the height of the now proposed glazing is. So I hope that answers your question on that point.
What I'm slightly concerned about, and I'd appreciate feedback on this, whilst it sounds great having glass instead of railings, a lot depends on the design of the railings. You can have skinny little things that almost needn't bother to be there, or you can actually have quite wide bands. Now, I'm mindful this was and is a conservation area. Actually, it's easy to forget that looking at this building now. And the railings, iron railings, certainly would have actually been much more in keeping with the character and feel of the area. And also, it's been described several times as urban. I would argue it's actually very much a suburban landscape. It's directly overlooking the park. There is no immediate property around there. And in fact, as you move further up the road, it becomes even more spacious and tree filled. So I just think we need to be a bit careful and consider that when we're considering the amenity impact on residents of Lodge Way.
Yeah, just to clarify, Councillor, it is on the edge of the conservation area. Conservation officer has been consulted and is satisfied that there's no sort of impact on the setting or significance of the conservation area. Again, in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area more generally, again, that is something that as a material consideration is for you as councillors to consider. And if you wish to come to a different view, again, that's something that would need to be justified with evidence. But as I say, as officers, our assessment is that the changes are actually relatively minor and wouldn't have a substantial impact in terms of considering what the current situation is in terms of character and appearance with what is approved in comparison to what is now then proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First thing I'd say in debate, and I'm assuming we're in debate now, is given the history and the background, I regret that we were unable to have a site visit on this one. And I think that would have been helpful to members of the committee. It certainly would have been to myself. Can I say I've got enormous sympathy, and I think we all have, for the residents in the area that are living with this decision that I would describe as a bizarre decision after 3 refusals, that the inspector actually passed it. I haven't seen the judgment, so perhaps I'm being unfair to say it's bizarre, but that's certainly the way I'm feeling right now about it. But the fact is, as colleagues have said, the principle of development was established by the inspector, not by us. We didn't want it, or this committee didn't want it. I wasn't a member, but this committee was overturned on 3 decisions, and then the inspector comes along or was it 2nd or 3rd inspector, as Councillor Ray has said, comes along and says no, you've got it wrong. And when that happened, the privacy of the local residents was lost. And so what we're faced with today is an application that, as I understand it, is about amending the existing balconies. And whilst we're actually told that, there are some improvements here that we can see, we have to ask ourselves, is there a significant increase in the loss of privacy and the amenity of the surrounding residents over and above what they lost, what the inspector took away, frankly? And I've got to say, we have to find, if we are going to turn this down, material considerations to say no to what is described as minor amendments. And I regret to say, I can't find any material consideration to turn it down. I can hear what colleagues are saying about, the colour of the glass or so on, and there is some argument to say, well, maybe we should defer this to see if that can be worked out, perhaps with the applicant. And I'd probably go along with that if somebody wants to propose that. I'm not actually going to propose that. I'm just saying I think we are in a pretty difficult place with this one. I accept what the legal officer says about, we're there for the whole district, but I'm sure everybody in this room, members of this committee, do listen to local residents' feelings, and they are important. But we have to have the material planning considerations in place, and I can't see them at the moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's Councillor Harris Bisnassing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It looks I've lost my page where I was. But anyway, I will not repeat any other things being said, but I agree with most of the things that have been said. But I fully agree, if Councillor Carbine Brown was proposing with regards to having an opaque or an obscure glass in that place to be conditioned, as Officer Phil Jordan indicated, that if we can condition this and indicate what we would like to do, we can put that forward. And I would be glad to second that proposal if Councillor Rosemary Carbine Brown can, we will propose that. Thank you.
If I'm correct, before you can propose that, you have to be able to prove that the other glass isn't sufficient. Am I correct in that?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make a few observations before members make a decision. So there have been a number of issues raised, which it's important to note are not material considerations. So mention was made about TPOs. I'm not aware that there's been any unauthorised removal of any TPO trees. A number of very small trees which were covered by the TPO were authorised to be removed as part of the original permission. But again, that's not something to consider now. That's been done and dusted. Issues such as common law nuisance, property values were mentioned. Again, not material. Lots and lots of case laws established that that's the case. Opposition to the overall development and the principle of development, that's come up a few times. I can't stress this enough. We cannot revisit the principle of development or the scale of development, type of development. This is a Section 73 application. We're only looking at a minor material amendment, a minor amendment to the balconies. And there's two issues: amenity, potential loss of privacy, and impact on the character of the area. So what members need to consider is what is the impact over and above what's already been approved. Is there such a significant additional loss of privacy that it tips it over into being unacceptable? Does it look significantly different that it tips it over into being detrimental to the character of the area? We as officers don't think this is finely balanced. We think it's well within the reasonable limits. So I think to defend it at appeal, you'd have to come up with a very strong argument as to why there is an unacceptable impact on privacy over and above what's already been approved. And I kind of agree with Councillor Morgan that it's more suburban than urban, although sort of probably a bit of both. With this new building, it becomes more urban. And you've got to think, what is a reasonable separation distance in this kind of context? This kind of relationship exists in urban or suburban areas all around the country. So you'd have to have a really, really strong argument as to why this is different and how, would it stack up at appeal? So they're just things for you to think about before you make a decision.
Thank you for that clarification. Next we have Penny. Thank you. Is it anything new that you're bringing, or are we going to go around in circles? Because we've spoken about the hewn glass, and I just want to make sure that we're not going to go around in circles with those other speakers. Thank you.
I'm going to suggest some policies we could consider that this falls into, and I'm particularly concerned about that southwest one as being extra impact from what is already approved. And I would say, you know, the MPPF section 12, particularly paragraph 127F, maybe some others, our own policy DE1, promoting good quality design. We've got contributing to the character of the area, no adverse impact on the amenity, privacy, etc. So in terms of justifying it as a material consideration, I would have thought we do have some policies there. And I think that is the main problem one. Maybe the others aren't quite as bad. Again, we are hoist obviously in lots of ways, but that one I would have thought we do have a justifiable reason to say it should be frosted, sort of not see-through glass or something opaque. Yeah, sorry. I'm just throwing that to the officers to make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. My view, Madam Chairman, this development, it's an eyesore in my view. It reminds me of the post office across the road there, which is also an eyesore.
Councillor Selby, we can't alter that.
Yeah,
We're only going with
However,
section 73.
My point following on from that is, when you've got an eyesore, you have to look at how you can improve it. And are these balconies going to be an improvement to it is the question. And I'm not so sure. It talks about these balconies that you can step out on. Well, if you can step out on them, it ain't going to matter what colour the windows are, whether they're glazed or whatever. There can be stained glass windows like St. Wolfram's, and it ain't going to matter because you can step out on the balcony and you can look out. And then it works the other way, doesn't it? Because they'll be sticking their washing in the balconies next. And so people down below will be able to see what colour underwear they've got on the line, won't they? So, you know, I'm not impressed with this, Madam Chairman, I have to say. I would like to see the materials that's being used. I would like to see what the view is like from up there. Personally, I would like a site visit. I'm going to propose a site visit, Madam Chairman. So then we can, in the meantime, we can see what the materials are and get a better picture of what these local residents, because I really do feel for them, what they're going to have to put up with for well, years and years and years to come. And in the meantime, I'd like to ask the enforcement to look into whether any disregard for our environment and our town and local people regarding that tree is.
That has already been mentioned several times. Thank
yeah, so I'd like them to do that in the meantime, please. So I'm going to propose a site visit and ask if we've got a seconder. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I don't know. Right. Yeah. Councillor Cabry-Brown, did you actually make a proposal or were you waiting for somebody else to?
No, Madam Chairman, I didn't make a proposal, but I'm prepared to.
Well, if you haven't already made it, then somebody else has made one before you.
Either way, I would propose, all right, I'll second or do whatever regarding deferral. We've left, as far as I'm concerned, I know we represent the whole of SKDC, but there are little patches all over the place where we let people down, and this is one of them.
Right, well, we can't help that at the minute, so we're going on proposals at the minute. Thank you, Councillor.
So we're deferring.
So are you proposing a site visit or a proper deferral?
A deferral for a site visit, if that's with a site visit.
And please, can we have samples of glass, an opaque whatever?
I'm just going to take some legal advice. Thank you.
Just to inform members that whilst potentially a deferral is something you can consider, the actual deadline for determination of this item is next week. So it's within the applicant's gift to agree an extension. If they don't agree an extension, then it might be that they can appeal non-determination and it's taken out of the committee's hands. Thank you.
Look at the applicants here, Madam Chairman. Can we ask the question?
It's not a question to be asked now. Obviously, the applicant's here and listening, but it is a matter that will be taken up with the case officer depending on the outcome of the application today. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah. No, have we had a proper seconder for the deferral? So you are quite well aware of what legal has said, that if it can't take place and if the applicant is not happy, that we run out of time, it could go for appeal. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the deadline for determination is not extended by agreement with the applicant, then they can appeal non-determination and it is taken out of the committee's hands. If he agrees an extension of time, then obviously it will come, the site visit will happen and it will come back to committee in due course. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, I'm just at this moment speaking to the proposal to defer. I believe that we should, in view of what we've been told, make a decision today.
Thank you, and I quite agree on that one. So we will go to the vote on deferral because it is serious in every aspect. But if we don't get that extension of time, it will go to appeal. And on the history of this, we have lost appeals. So just think very carefully how you vote, please. So all those in favour of deferment, please raise your hand. I'd already gone to the vote, so we'll just go to the vote, please. On those in favour of deferral, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those abstaining? 1. So deferral has lost. Thank you. So in that case, I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Sorry, can you put your mic on?
There was another option to actually request a condition to request a different material.
But again, we have to prove substantive reasons why.
I thought somebody had already listed a load of reasons why.
Well, it hasn't been proposed and it hasn't been seconded. I've made a proposal and I'm waiting
Sorry,
for.
Chair, but it wasn't proposed because there was a deferral on the books at the time.
Right, okay. Do you want to propose that, Councillor Milnes?
What am I proposing? Sorry, I think I'm losing the plot here.
You're not the only one. Right, you said SP.
No, I was just trying to get advice on the NPPF section 12, importantly, paragraph 127, majorly F, and our DE1 policy promoting good quality design as to whether, certainly for that southwestern balcony window glazing, there is an impact on the amenity of neighbouring users. And I did accept that we've already got the building there, but that was a significant change, I thought, to move the glazing and put some in that elevation. And it is the closest elevation to number 6. And that on those bases, is it therefore unreasonable to request some form of opaque glazing there? That's what I was asking, and it's the reasonableness of it that I was asking about.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, if I just try and, so we're now talking primarily about this elevation, aren't we? And in particular, this balcony here that's being introduced on the corner. So I think what members just need to consider is the existing approved position, which at the moment has all these windows on this elevation in any case, which sort of overlook in the same direction and in the same sort of proximity. Leaves the cursor. always at the top. These Juliet balconies, which do allow some overlooking in that same direction. I appreciate that they're sort of, recessed, or not recessed, but they're sort of set back some additional distance. If you look at the drawing in the top right-hand corner, you can see there's some additional distance. And again, there is that existing balcony that's approved, but again, has already been sort of shown that is sort of recessed in the building and the setback's different. So it is for members really to make an assessment of the current position in terms of overlooking a loss of privacy in that direction, and whether the introduction of that additional balcony on that top corner with a hued glass results in any further significant loss of amenity to the owner of that property. I think also taking account of, I think we saw to the rear of the property that there's also that dormer window that already looks into that garden anyway. And I think the officer view is that, regrettably, and I think as Councillor Dilks said, we've got a position here that has been granted permission by the planning inspectorate, and that results in a certain set of conditions. What we're now looking at is this additional change, or is this change resulting in any further significant loss of privacy? The officer's assessment is quite strongly that it doesn't. It would be possible, as I've said, to refuse the application if you've come to a different view, but our view is that that's not reasonable and not justified. The additional condition that we talked about, where we would seek condition details of the glazing, again, it is not considered to be a necessary condition. And in the same way, the applicant could appeal against non-determination. Should permission be granted with that additional condition, they could appeal that condition as well, which would effectively take that out of the control of the council. To sort of summarise, I suppose there are options. I think the options on the table, or the options to consider really, are the application's refused because you consider the additional impact to be so bad that it warrants refusal in terms of that amenity. Add the additional condition, which again we don't consider to be justified, and would again put the council at risk in an appeal situation, or to accept the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, and please bear in mind that I've already proposed that we accept, as Councillor Milnes hadn't made a proposal. Not yet. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Put you.
This is the first chance I've actually spoken on the whole thing rather than ask questions. I have listened to all of the comments made, and that includes those of the residents, and taken into account our policies, and taken into account the site, which is actually very high profile. And I found myself, I will say, with a dilemma. The reason I've got a dilemma is because actually I think quite strongly that in view of the historic character of the area, there are two aspects to a conservation area. There is the view from, which I would agree is not been particularly changed, and the view of from a conservation area. So Wyndham Park, and I have to say I'm a member of the Wyndham Park Forum, the view of that building is affected by whatever finish goes on that building, whatever our view now is of that building. So I have a dilemma, because I think that the raw iron finish, or the iron finish, actually would be preferable as a finish for that site than glazing, which is just totally out of character, completely out of character for the area. On the other hand, I have seen conservation areas where glass contrasting can actually be quite an attractive finish. So a lot depends. Hence, I can understand people wanting that deferral. An awful lot depends on what it is. I have a friend who lives in New York. And in New York, tinted glazing is used the whole time in order to provide privacy between blocks and also come from London, where the same thing applies. The trouble with tinted glazing is actually it only works to a degree. You can actually, and it all depends on the level of tinting. And so picking up the point about the evidence, we aren't being presented with the full details regarding actually what's being proposed, because you can have tinting, which is barely makes any difference whatsoever. And you actually need very heavy tinting, almost blackout screening to actually provide full privacy. So the tinting solution, I'm not comfortable with because of the wide variances, unless we could determine what level of obscurity there is. Obscure glass does provide some privacy because it breaks up the actual picture, what you're looking at. I think the height will also provide a degree of privacy. I'm only 5'4", so being blunt, I couldn't actually see over the top, therefore, if it's 6 foot. I couldn't actually see over the top. I don't agree that there is not an impact, however, on the residents, which is why I actually, although I feel, yes, we could argue it technically, we approve this, I actually would, am prepared to refuse, because there's a huge difference between a window view where somebody might be passing or even just standing, and I notice they're actually quite small side windows largely, and actually the ability to stand on a balcony and physically overlook. There's a massive difference. And that's why I would disagree with that argument. Now, the location of the balcony takes it round, so it is affecting in particular the property on the corner of Lodge Way. Now, we've had reference to fact, well, they're already being overlooked. Well, no, actually, they're not. What we're talking about is a dormer window that's in a roof angled upwards, deliberately, no doubt, for that very reason. So it doesn't actually directly overlook the gardens, but this does. So I am minded to refuse, and at the end of the day, are we worse off? Because we're being told if we approve, we're going to be in the same boat anyway. If we defer, we're in the same boat anyway. And if it goes to appeal, it goes to appeal. But I feel the decision today is to say we had a decision that was made that many of us weren't happy with in the first place. It's made a situation that's created, in effect, a goldfish bowl for the residents of Lodge Way. So do we make that even worse? And I'm not prepared to vote for something that makes it even worse.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks, do you have anything new to bring?
Very kind. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just trying to find a way forward that we can get some consensus to. And I welcome Phil Jordan's comments, particularly, but wonder if I can sort of ask if we could move it forward by putting in a condition, yes, that the glass on these particular windows that we're talking about, balconies that we're talking about, whether it's translucent, frosted, or whatever, is by negotiation with the applicant as a condition, right? And it is as many of the other conditions that we've already put in, and I think there are 12 of them, are that it has to be by, with the agreement of, and the officers have to sign it off. I appreciate that you're already relatively happy with what's being proposed, but we've now got the committee's view on that. And I would ask, if you were able to take that into consideration in coming to an agreement with the applicant on what sort of glass is used. And the reason, why I'd put that condition in is, I just reflect some of the other reasons that the conditions are put in, and it is to ensure that the impact on privacy, on the loss of privacy to neighbouring residents is minimised, and/or add the same reason as we've got for condition 12, which is in the interest of visual amenity and to ensure a satisfactory form of development. So I'm just asking, could that be a way forward?
Thank you. Bill.
I think the way I see things is that there's a proposition on the table which needs to be voted on. As I said before, if members thought the material of the balconies was important, that needed further consideration, then yes, a condition could be applied in that respect. I think it's worth bearing in mind what might happen next if that was the case. And as I've said, the council would effectively grant permission with that additional condition in place. The applicant would have the choice to either comply with the condition and submit details, or they could appeal against that condition. If they decided to comply with the condition, they would have to submit details pursuant to the requirements of that condition, and it would then be up for officers to determine the acceptability of that of those materials. So that's how those two scenarios would effectively go under that scenario of applying an additional condition.
Thank you. I've already made a proposal that's on the table. It has been seconded. So I think we need to go for the vote on that one.
I'd just like to clarify something else, please, because I think it's important, if I may. The windows in that western elevation within the white bit, I believe, are toilet windows. So they're not in the same way overlooking, are they? And presumably they might even be obscure glass, I would have thought. So that might make quite a difference in the way we think about it. I've just looked at some floor plans and I stand to be corrected, but perhaps you could confirm that for us.
No, I'm happy to accept that as the right understanding, but I think I would still make the point about the position of the Juliet balconies, the existing approved balcony, and the windows on the recessed element. But again, it's a fair point and something for members to put into their considerations.
Madam Chairman, may I just ask you on a point of order, actually? If you I appreciate that you've got a proposal that you've made and has been seconded by the Vice Chairman. If you had an amendment to that along the lines that I just outlined a few minutes ago, would that be taken first as an amendment?
I'll get some legal advice on that one. The amendment would go first.
Well, in that case, I would propose, what I said earlier as an amendment, that it is. So I'm actually proposing approval with a condition that the glass in the particular windows that we're concerned about is agreed, is by agreement with the officers, having heard the comments of the committee. And the reason for that condition is to ensure that the impact on loss of privacy to neighbouring residents is minimised. Thank you.
Councillor Bisnassi.
I will second that proposal.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just ask the officers, are you happy with that? Can we have some clarification on that a bit?
I think based on the officer recommendation, we don't consider that to be necessary, but I think as I've said, if members consider that detail to be necessary and important, it's something that's in your gifts to include on any grant of permission.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have got reasons for the condition, haven't we, to ensure the is that, yeah, is approval with the condition that glass is in agreement with the officers and to ensure that the impact of loss of privacy is minimalised. Is you happy with that? Yeah. Lovely, thank you. Okay, that's been seconded. Councillor Selby, and then we will go to the vote.
Thank you. Yeah, question please, Madam Chair. But this development, can it be described as infill development under SP3? Because I mean, it does infill the corner, I suppose, in some respects, because SP3C says that it refers to it does not cause harm or unacceptable impact upon the occupier's amenity of adjacent properties. Can the planning officer just give us their view on that, please, Madam Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, Fillmore.
So for this application, for this development, SP3 is irrelevant because, as I said earlier, we're not revisiting the principle of development, which is what SP3 is all about. We only consider those very minor material changes to what's already been approved.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry.
You're perfectly entitled as a committee to consider issues of privacy and amenity. That's a material consideration that obviously you can take into account, and it's possible to come to different views on the degree of, is it acceptable, is it not acceptable? But for the purpose of this application, SP3 not relevant.
Thank you. Right. With that additional. Right, thank you. And then we will go to the vote because we're going around and around in circles again. Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the amendment seems a reasonable compromise. It still depends on the material. Of course, we need to be aware, I would suggest, given the design of the building, that you can't have a patchwork effect. So whatever is applied, if there are balconies, wherever they are, or the overall finish, it will apply to the whole building. It's not just going to be that one balcony.
No. Right, we'll go to the vote then, please. All those in favour of approval with this additional condition? That's 8 for. Those against? 2. And abstentions? 2. That has been carried. Thank you. And we will have a 5-minute break. And I mean 5 minute, well, 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes, please. And make sure you are back here at 1:45. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, can I just ask something, please? Could I have it minuted, and I do mean minuted, that I objected to this proposal? And I would also, well, I tried to do it before and you wouldn't allow me to speak because you wanted to get your vote through. I can understand that. I can understand that, Madam Chairman. But if somebody wishes something to be recorded, which I did, I wanted it to be recorded that I voted against, and in no situation whatsoever would I support this. I'm not going to be responsible for another Iveta house, which we've got across the road. Yeah, I know it's been approved, but I'm just asking, can it be minuted?